A professional office setting with a confident black woman in a white suit standing calmly near a coffee machine. In front of her, a white man in a dark business suit is angrily pointing and yelling. Several co-workers in business attire are watching the interaction in the background, with some appearing amused. The scene takes place in a modern office with glass walls and natural lighting. The conference room was alive with chatter and the subtle hum of expensive gadgets. Executives in tailored suits shuffled through their notes, some barely masking their skepticism. They weren't expecting anything out of the ordinary that morning. Just another boardroom meeting at Braxton Global Industries, a $1.4 billion corporate giant in tech innovation. That was until Imani Cole walked in. Wearing a modest navy blue pantsuit and carrying a simple leather bag, she entered the room quietly. She was early, unlike most of the board members, and scanned the long glass table for a place to sit. Before she could even pull out a chair, a tall white executive named Gerald piped up from the other end of the table. Coffee, please. 1 sugar, no cream, he said, not even glancing at her. And make it quick. The real meeting's about to begin. A few chuckles escaped from the back row. Another executive, Susan, added with a smirk, "Can you also grab the pastry from the hallway?" They forgot to bring them in. Imani paused. For 10 long seconds, she said nothing. Then, with a soft smile, she turned and exited the room. The board members continued their banter, unaware that the woman they had just mistaken for an assistant was not only invited by the chairman, but was about to be named the new CEO. 10 minutes later, the room fell silent as Chairman Elliot Graves, a respected elder figure with decades of experience, entered. He looked around at the confused faces, then glanced at the empty-head seat at the table. "Where's Ms. Cole?" he asked. One of the men stammered. "You mean the coffee lady?" Graves' expression tightened. "That coffee lady is Imani Cole, the new chief executive officer of this company. She now has full decision-making authority, including personnel. You'd be wise to listen carefully from this point forward." At that moment, Imani re-entered the room, not with coffee, but with a stack of briefing folders. She took her place at the head of the table and opened the first folder. "Before we begin," she said calmly, "a few of you may want to reconsider how you interact with the people around you, because from now on, I'll be watching very closely." The boardroom was frozen in stunned silence. Imani's journey hadn't been easy. Born and raised in Southside Chicago, Imani's childhood was filled with challenges. Her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, while her father, a mechanic, taught her everything he knew about resilience. She excelled in school, won a full scholarship to MIT, and later earned her MBA from Wharton. But what really set her apart was her mind. She had a rare ability to spot broken systems and design better ones. By 32, she had helped restructure 3 failing corporations. And she did it without arrogance or ego, just precision, grit, and a powerful vision for the future. So when Braxton Global started losing market share and investor confidence, the board secretly reached out to Imani. She studied the company from the outside for 4 months before agreeing to join, on one condition. She would come in without title or fanfare, just for one meeting, to observe the leadership culture firsthand. What she witnessed confirmed everything she suspected, a toxic hierarchy rooted in arrogance, bias, and complacency. The first week under her leadership changed everything. Imani wasted no time. She restructured the executive board, introduced a performance-based review system, and opened direct lines of communication from the janitorial staff all the way up to C-suite leaders. She met with every department, walking through the building without an entourage, listening, really listening, to the people on the ground. She initiated a mentorship program specifically for women and minorities in the company, investing heavily in internal talent that had been previously overlooked. Under her direction, Braxton Global not only recovered but grew. Within 18 months, the company's valuation jumped by 28%. Shareholders were stunned, competitors scrambled, and business magazines couldn't get enough of her story. The man who asked for coffee, reassigned to a support role in the mailroom, at Imani's recommendation. Her statement to HR was simple. Everyone starts somewhere. Let's see how well he learns humility. Imani Cole's story became more than just a business headline. It was a global message, a reminder that true leadership doesn't wear a label, demand a title, or need to prove anything. It walks in quietly, observes, and then transforms everything from the inside out. She didn't need to say, "I'm the boss." She just became one, with grace, intelligence, and unshakable power. For the next few months, the entire company felt the tremor change. But Imani wasn't looking to create shockwaves for the sake of attention. She was reconstructing the very bones of Braxton Global Industries. The same glass doors that had once symbolized exclusion and elitism were now open, transparent, and welcoming. Her goal wasn't to lead from above, but alongside. She installed what she called floor sessions every Friday. No PowerPoints, no suits, just employees from all levels gathered together to speak openly. At first, people were hesitant. But once a shy janitor named Kareem stood up and suggested a new routing method for supply deliveries, and Imani not only listened but implemented his idea, the dam broke. Ideas poured in from departments long forgotten, and morale soared. In one of those sessions, an intern nervously presented an app prototype meant to streamline the company's digital services. Most CEOs would have nodded politely, patted the intern's back, and moved on. Not Imani. She called a tech lead into the room and said, "Run this. I want a working demo by next Thursday." That intern now heads an entire division and has become a rising star in the tech world. But success comes with resistance. Not everyone was thrilled with Imani's rise. Behind closed doors, a few powerful board members whispered about slowing her down. One of them, Leonard Crane, a legacy board member with deep political connections, believed the company should stay in safe hands, by which he meant traditional hands. He initiated a subtle campaign to discredit her, hinting at fiscal risks, leaking false rumors to the press, and trying to spin the changes as unstable. Imani noticed, but rather than play his game, she stayed focused. She documented every move. When the rumors reached the Wall Street Journal, she responded not with statements, but with data. She showed charts, numbers, employee reviews, investor gains, and market growth. In a dramatic quarterly meeting, she pulled up a slideshow titled, "Whispers versus Results." Slide after slide, she compared anonymous criticisms to documented outcomes. The boardroom was quiet by the end, except for the chairman's applause. Leonard Crane quietly submitted his resignation 3 weeks later. Imani's past was her power. What they didn't know, what most of the world didn't know, was that Imani's journey was marked by fire. At 17, she had lost her father to a workplace accident that could have been prevented if a manager had simply listened to a complaint. That moment forged a resolve to rise to the highest seat in the room, not for prestige, but to make sure no one else was ever ignored. At college, she faced daily microaggressions. People questioned her presence. Professors assumed she was there on a quota. Still, she graduated with top honors. At her first job in finance, she was passed over for promotion in favor of a man who plagiarized a proposal. So she left quietly and started consulting independently. Within 2 years, the same company hired her at triple the salary to fix what they broke without her. Every moment of disrespect had become her fuel, not to retaliate, but to refine her brilliance. And then came the merger. 9 months into her tenure, Imani was approached by Valin Corp, a rival tech giant interested in merging assets. It was the biggest decision Braxton Global had faced in decades. Everyone expected Imani to say yes. The numbers looked good. The headlines would be glorious. But Imani saw what others didn't, a cultural mismatch. Valin's leadership had a reputation for cutting costs by gutting teams. Imani refused to sell her people's futures for short-term gain. So, she did the unthinkable. She walked away from the deal. Shareholders panicked, briefly. But within 6 months, Braxton Global acquired a smaller but more ethically aligned firm, expanded into 5 new international markets, and doubled its annual revenue. Behind every empire is a voice. One evening, after another long day, a junior associate named Delilah knocked on Imani's office door. She was shaking, holding a crumpled notebook. I want to show you something I've been working on. I didn't know if it was good enough." Imani looked up, smiled, and said, "Sit down. I was waiting for you." That's how Imani Cole operated. She waited for the voices that didn't know they deserved to speak. And when they did, she gave them a platform. She believed empires weren't built on dominance. They were built on dignity, discipline, and dreams. Outside the company walls, the world watched. She became a symbol, especially to young women, to black professionals, to overlooked leaders in hidden corners. She didn't just change the trajectory of a company. She rewrote the rules of corporate leadership. She was featured on magazine covers, invited to Davos, asked to write a book, but she declined most interviews. Why? Because her mission wasn't complete. "I'm not here for applause," she once told a reporter. "I'm here to build a door so wide, no one ever needs to knock again." Months had passed since Imani Cole's quiet revolution began reshaping Braxton global industry from the inside out. The once stagnant corridors of the company now pulsed with energy. Employees who had once buried their creativity beneath layers of corporate silence now shared ideas like oxygen, freely, without fear. But Imani wasn't satisfied. Great leaders don't just chase profit margins. They build legacies. And legacies don't come from sitting safely behind a polished desk. They are carved through challenge, resistance, and sacrifice. The inner war begins. Beneath the surface of Braxton's newly awakened culture, a deeper battle was brewing. Several high-ranking investors, old money types with deep influence, had grown uneasy. To them, Imani was too radical, too disruptive, too focused on people and not enough on aggressive expansion. They called secret meetings, shared hushed conversations over cigars in private lounges. They couldn't publicly attack her. She was too successful, too loved. But they could manipulate perception. Quietly, they began leaking distorted reports to media outlets. They funded anonymous think pieces questioning whether empathy-driven leadership was sustainable in the cutthroat world of tech. Imani saw it, and she prepared. Rather than confront them head-on, she launched her next major initiative, Project Legacy. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't for headlines. It was for the future. She redirected company funds into community-based incubators, providing resources to minority founders and young engineers from underfunded schools. She opened Braxton's doors to host mentorship workshops, coding boot camps, and startup expos where investment wasn't based on credentials, but on raw potential. The media tried to twist it as charity. Imani made it clear. This isn't charity. This is strategy. If we don't invest in the forgotten, we lose the future. A whisper from the past. One evening, while reviewing performance data, Imani received an unexpected visitor, her old high school teacher, Mrs. Hargrove. She hadn't seen her in over 15 years. "I was in town," Mrs. Hargrove said with a soft smile, "and I saw your name on every billboard. I just wanted to see you, to remind you of something." She handed Imani an old, yellowed paper. It was a poem Imani had written in the 10th grade. Its last lines read, "They won't see me coming, but they'll feel me when I arrive." Tears welled up in Imani's eyes, not from pride, but from remembering the girl who wrote those words. The girl who had no idea the world she would one day change. That night, Imani stayed in the office until dawn, writing not code, but letters. One to her mother, one to her late father, and one to the young women in Braxton's internship program, which she titled, "Lead Even When They Don't Clap." A reckoning at the summit. The following quarter, Braxton Global was invited to the World Corporate Leadership Summit in Singapore. Imani was selected as keynote speaker. Backstage, her assistant whispered, "Several of the investors who tried to smear you, they're in the front row." Imani smiled. When she took the stage, she didn't start with numbers or projections. She started with a story. The story of her first day in the boardroom. The day she was asked to fetch coffee. The day she chose grace over anger and strategy over ego. She ended her speech with this: "Power doesn't reveal who you are. It reveals what you believe in. I don't lead because I want to be seen. I lead because I was once invisible." The room erupted, not just in applause, but in awakening. The transformation spreads. After the summit, other companies reached out, asking for blueprints to mirror Braxton's model. Imani didn't sell it. She shared it freely. "Real change isn't proprietary," she told her team. It's a movement. Meanwhile, the disgruntled investors quietly sold their shares, unable to keep up with the wave of change Imani had set in motion. One of them, years later, would admit in an interview, "She beat us, not with aggression, but with vision. That's the scariest kind of leader, the kind you underestimated." And then came the letter. One rainy morning, Imani received a package with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Dear Ms. Cole, you don't know me, but you changed my life. I'm a student from Detroit. I watch your speech online, and I no longer see ceilings. I only see doors. I plan to walk through every single one. A future CEO." Imani folded the letter gently and placed it in her drawer, alongside her father's watch and her mother's first paycheck stub. She didn't smile. She nodded. Because she knew the mission was working. The world was watching. And somewhere, another girl was being asked to serve coffee, unaware she was just 10 minutes away from commanding the room. It was year 2 of Imani Cole's leadership at Braxton Global, and the corporate world was no longer just watching. They were reacting. Some tried to emulate her methods, awkwardly inserting empathy into mission statements without understanding what it meant. Others tried to discredit her still, more quietly now, hoping her momentum would fade like a trend. But trends disappear. Movements evolve. And Imani had become a movement. The turning point, when the world came knocking. It started with a message from the United Nations. They were forming a global think tank on ethical innovation and digital equity, bringing together minds from 5 continents. Imani was invited not just to attend, but to lead. When she walked into that international summit, she carried more than a briefcase. She carried the weight of millions of unheard voices. She spoke not just as a CEO, but as a bridge between ambition and justice, between innovation and inclusion. Her keynote address echoed around the world. Technology without conscience is chaos. Profit without people is poverty. And power without humility is the beginning of collapse. Leaders from tech giants in China, Europe, Africa, and the Americas lined up to collaborate. Braxton Global wasn't just a business anymore. It was becoming a global conscience. Meanwhile, back home, a storm was brewing. As Imani's influence expanded, so did the pressure. Some media outlets began labeling her too political, accusing her of straying from corporate interests. Anonymous critics accused her of turning Braxton into a social experiment. A senator with ties to rival tech companies began pushing for legislation that would regulate corporate activism. And within Braxton, an anonymous whistleblower leaked documents suggesting Imani's funding of outside initiatives had stretched financial limits. It was a coordinated attack, but Imani didn't flinch. Instead, she opened the books publicly. In a televised press conference, she released Braxton financials line by line. Every investment, every return, every social initiative. The numbers spoke louder than her words. Braxton's net growth had tripled since her tenure began. Employee retention was the highest in company history. Over 40 startups had been born from Project Legacy, many led by people who had once worked in Braxton's mailroom, cafeteria, and cleaning crews. And then came her MIC drop moment. If doing what's right makes us controversial, then let Braxton Global be the loudest controversy on the planet. The collapse of her critics. One by one, her detractors fell silent, not because she silenced them, but because the truth outlived the noise. That senator lost re-election. The rival executives, 2 were exposed for corruption. The whistleblower turned out to be a former exec passed over for promotion, whose own emails revealed a personal vendetta. Imani didn't press charges. Instead, she said, let him watch what real leadership looks like. That's punishment enough. The deepest test came from within. One evening, long after the offices had emptied, Imani stood alone in the data room. Dozens of screens blinked softly, showing graphs, code, and team dashboards. She wasn't looking at numbers. She was looking at herself, reflected in the glass. The pressure, the expectations, the constant watchfulness, they weighed on her. Even strength has its limits. And Imani had carried the world on her shoulders without ever asking for applause. Then came a voice, not from behind her, but from her memory, Her father's voice. Baby girl, never let them make you small to fit in rooms you were born to redesign. Tears came. Quietly. Finally. Then resolve followed. Just as quietly. She whispered, I'm not done yet. The empire expands. Within the next year, Braxton Global opened innovation labs in Nairobi, Sao Paulo, and Manila, places long ignored by Western tech giants. Instead of extracting talent, Imani built ecosystems to grow it in place. She launched a mentorship exchange where young coders from Brooklyn mentored young engineers in Ghana, and vice versa. She believed in mutual empowerment, not charity. And her empire, once a boardroom with arrogance, had become a network of hope, dignity, and fire. A letter to her younger self. On her 39th birthday, Imani did something she hadn't done in years. She sat at her old wooden desk in her home and wrote a letter, but not to investors, not to her team, to herself. Dear me, the girl who was told she talks too boldly, the woman who was told to lower her gaze in the boardroom, the leader they once mistook for an assistant. You didn't need their permission to rise. You needed your own conviction to stay. Never forget, your power was never in your voice, it was in your choice. And every time you chose integrity over convenience, you didn't just lead a company, you lit a path for millions. Keep going, even when you're tired, especially when you're tired. Imani,